All right, welcome to the first annual 919 College Football Podcast. I'm Daniel here with Bo. Just a couple guys that are huge college football fans, and we wanted to share our opinions with the world. What do you got, Bo?
Hey, what's up, Daniel? Really excited for the 2018 college football season. We're huge college football fans, all conferences. We're based here in the 919, obviously, so we are close to home with the ACC, and but also follow along with the SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, and also the Big 12.
And we throw a little group of five action in there every now and then. We're not going to touch on that too much in this podcast, but shout out to the schools like ECU, UNCW football team that's been undefeated for many years.
They're really good over there in Wilmington. I think they'll have a nice team this year. They're really good. It's just tough to beat them on that sand. It really is.
Well, another great thing about being in North Carolina, there's a ton of schools. We're just looking here at Penn State's schedule, and they open up with App, so that's a big game. Of course, we all remember when App went up to the Big House and took down mighty Michigan.
Do you think they have a chance?
They might. I haven't really scouted App too much this year, but it would be. I could see Penn State being a little overrated after last year, but let's go ahead and roll right into it. Just to give you guys a little bit of background information on what makes us qualified to host such a podcast. We're actually voters in the College Football Researchers Association poll. Goes by the CFRA poll, and there's a website for it, so you can go and check that out online. It's been dormant for several years, but we've had a guy who sort of got it restarted, and it's recognized by the NCAA. So it is an official poll, and we are two voters in there. Now, you can access that at CFRApoll.com, so that's CFRAPOLL.com, and you can check out our rankings. So let's go ahead and get started. We're just going to break down our top 25s, and they do vary a little bit. Then go through things like the conference champ and division champ for each Power 5 conference. Then some sleepers, some teams that people aren't pegging to do great things, but we think have a good chance to go a long ways. And then some of the overrated schools, universities, that people are saying will do big things, and we definitely don't think they will. Followed up by a playoff prediction. So, with gambling becoming legalized, we will only take 5% of whatever you bet on based on our podcast. So
I think that's completely fair, because we're really good at our predictions. I think that I'll go to Vegas all the time and just put down money on some underdogs and win them every single time. So with that, let's get it right into it. Let's go ahead. Daniel, what is your top 10?
So just to break down my top 10, of course, starting with Alabama, nothing new. They've been the top dog of college football ever since Nick Saban got there. That's followed up by Clemson and Georgia. And we were just talking about how those three schools have 6 great quarterbacks. So it's going to be an interesting storyline for each of those schools to see who winds up getting the majority of snaps at quarterback. I think at Alabama, I don't know. That's a tough situation. Jalen Hurts is 26-2 as a starter. What do you do there, Bo? What do you think?
I think you have to stick with Jalen Hurts. Tua, he had a great second half and a great overtime against Georgia, but Georgia had little to no film to study against what Tua could have come in and provided for the Alabama Crimson Tide offense that night. Hurts is a winner. Everyone on that Alabama team is a winner. I don't think you can go much wrong with Hurts at all. And I don't think the offensive side of the ball is going to be Alabama's trouble at all. I think it's going to be defense this year. They've basically lost their entire secondary to the NFL.
Yeah, they've had some injuries at linebacker.
Yeah, and they've had some injuries at linebacker. So I think that's really going to be the test. But there's no denying that they have talent among talent. So I think you could put Hurts in there, and they'll do he'll continue to do what they have done, which is win.
Yeah. It certainly doesn't seem to be the popular opinion. It almost seems that the sports media has it as a foregone conclusion that Tua is going to win this quarterback
battle
competition.
The battle. So. The Tua's already opened up as the leading Heisman for the bet to be the Heisman winner. I mean, and he's played a half an overtime of football on the big stage. I'm sure he got in sometime against those smaller schools that Alabama plays during their schedule, but. It's still very unproven, I think.
I agree. Yeah, so first piece of betting advice here in the podcast. Do not bet on Tua to win the Heisman Trophy because he may not even be the starter.
Yeah.
But so after Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia for my top 10, I follow that up with Washington. I really like Chris Peterson. I think he's a great coach. Jake Browning, senior year, going to go out on top. Actually made my top 25 right before the Urban Meyer scandal broke. So I have Ohio State at 5. I haven't really decided how much I think that this scandal is going to affect the team. I mean, I really don't see, maybe they lose to TCU, but other than that, it's not like they're going to lose to Oregon State at home on the first game, and then I'm not sure who their second game is.
But they are in that Big Ten East, which is loaded,
right?
And we'll get into that later with our conference picks and our other top 10 teams because Big Ten East is loaded.
Yeah, the Big Ten East might be the strongest conference, even considering the SEC West. But to continue to roll on with my top 10, I've got Wisconsin at 6, Auburn at 7, Oklahoma at 8, Penn State at 9, and Mississippi State at 10. So that's 3. Let's see, we've got 4 SEC teams, 3 Big Ten teams. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the SEC and Big Ten stack up. It'd be really cool to see like a Big Ten SEC. Like the ACC Big Ten Challenge in basketball. It'd be cool if they did that in football.
So the thing that sticks out to me here is that you have Mississippi State at 10. You want to explain why you have them as the 10th best team in your opinion? Yeah.
So losing Dan Mullen was huge. I think Dan Mullen's a great coach, but he definitely did not leave the cabinets bare there in Starkville. Nick Fitzgerald is a great quarterback, and they've got a good defense coming back as well. And I think this might be the time where they can capitalize on other teams in the conference being down. So Texas A&M is a team that they should definitely beat. Ole Miss is a team they should beat. It'll be a good opportunity for them to finally overtake Alabama this year. I'm not sure if they'll do it or not, but it'd be a great opportunity for them to do it with that strong defense followed up by a good offense and led by Nick Fitzgerald. So
almost pulled it off last year in Starksville.
Yeah.
But obviously now the game's going to be in Tuscaloosa, so there's another barrier there.
Exactly. So it'll be really interesting to see if Mississippi State does hold up, but I think that's a good team. I don't know. I think Joe Moorhead's a good coach. I don't know if he'll be able to recruit at the level that Dan Mullen did, but it'll be interesting to see in the coming years if Mississippi State can sort of maintain this upward trajectory that Dan Mullen had them on prior to taking the job at Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what does your top 25 or at least top 10 look like? I know there's a few variances, but a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah, and our top 2 are the same. I think it's tough to, even though we've talked about what our worries are about Bama. It's tough to not have them at number 1, and then Clemson, the Tigers number 2. They're both going to be strong. Would not be surprised if Clemson went undefeated. I think Alabama's going to have a tougher time with that. Even though the schedule for Alabama is a little weak this year, a little weaker. I wouldn't say weak. But Clemson, I think that they're just so much stronger than everyone else in the ACC. I know Florida State may be coming back with new coach Willie Taggart. They may have some belief, and Tallahassee's always full of talent for football. And my coming at number 3, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. The scandal with Urban Meyer, which now we've come to learn that he will be suspended for the first 3 games, which includes TCU. The third game of the
in Dallas too,
and that game is in Dallas. But I don't think that's really going to make a difference or any distractions. These players are dealing with distractions of all the time, all around them. I mean, I don't really give much credence to distractions. Yeah. Once it's all said and done, onto the football field.
Especially at these big schools like Ohio State, I mean, the amount of media coverage they get, there's got to be an unlimited amount of distractions.
Yeah, media coverage. I mean, these guys are on campus every single day. I'm sure people are talking to them, trying to be their friend and everything like that. Just
trying to get some money out of them.
trying to say that they're boys with I don't know. With Christian Wilkins at Clemson. Number 4, and this is where me and Daniel here will differ on our top 10. I got the Hurricanes of Miami at number 4. I think that their defense is going to be loaded. They have 2 great linebackers to just lead that defense. Their defensive line is also very good. I think their offense. They need to improve from last year for sure, and their quarterback play needs to be good. But they always have good running backs, and they're in a division in the ACC, which many think is a down year for the ACC Coastal.
It certainly seems like Clemson got exposed a little bit last year, and I think Alabama's defense is going to follow up with that well. But when Clemson played Miami, they were right there. There was not a lack of, there was no athletic difference. For instance, when Clemson plays Duke, you can tell they're different in the athletes on the field.
Yeah, there's a talent discrepancy there.
Right. And so I imagine that if had Miami won and made it to the college football playoff and played Alabama, it probably would have been a similar story in terms of how Clemson fared against Alabama as how Miami fared against if they would have played.
And that's no disrespect to Duke, because I think they're actually going to be pretty good this year. And David Cutcliffe's a really good coach, and they got a good quarterback in Daniel Jones, who a lot of people think he's a first rounder. But anyways, let's go to Auburn at number 5. The Auburn War Eagle Tigers. I don't know how you can have 2 nicknames. Roll whatever they want to be called these days. The Auburn Tigers, Jared Stidham, probably I think the best quarterback in the SEC. He's going to have a lot of pressure on his shoulders to be able to perform, especially come the Alabama game. I think people they beat them last year. I think people kind of expect them or want them to repeat again this year and maybe get back to that the SEC championship game. They have a tough game against Washington to open up the season in Atlanta. That's going to be a really fun game. It's going to be a hard one to predict. I think Auburn pulls that one out, though.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like, even if they lose that game, it doesn't feel like they're immediately eliminated. Now, certainly their path would be much more difficult because they have a difficult schedule, and it's it would be difficult to see the committee putting in an Auburn team with 2 or 3 losses over a 1-loss Notre Dame or something along those lines. I mean, Notre Dame seems to, and we can probably rant on this, but Notre Dame seems to get some good favoritism from the powers that be in college football. So if Auburn can win this first game, they're certainly on a great road to make the playoff. But if they lose, it doesn't feel like they're automatically eliminated.
And speaking of Washington, I have them coming up at number 6. They just have Auburn to begin the season, and then they will also play Stanford. That's going to be a great game. a tough game for Washington. I forget where that game is, where that game will be played at. But then I have Oklahoma coming in number 7. I think they lose Baker Mayfield, but they will replace him with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, and then he's also he chose not to go play baseball. He wants to play football, and that kind of says, I think that says a lot about who he is and what he wants to do.
Yeah.
We'll see how what kind of season he has, and I think really their season kind of rides and dies with Kyler Murray.
It's going to be interesting to see how well he does. He was definitely a big-time recruit coming out of high school, and then when he played at Texas A&M, I think he had, a couple games that he played well for a freshman, but I don't think he ever blew anyone's socks off. And then last year, of course, he got limited snaps and blowouts against FCS opponents or group of 5 teams. So it'll be interesting to see how he does against Big 12 defense. Not that the Big 12's known for their defense. I mean, it's their scores wind up in the 50s half the time, but certainly more serviceable than some of the teams that he's faced in the past couple years. So that'll be exciting. But what else you got, Bo?
Number 8, I got the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm not down on them per se. I think that they lost 2 NFL running backs, and Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. They're high on DeAndre Swift, which he is good. We saw him play a lot last year, and he is a good player. But I don't think he is a Michel or a Chubb.
Yeah.
But they always have a stable of running backs. They also who's going to be their receiver? They lost their top receiver in Weems.
Yep.
Weems is gone, and their defense, they lost talent on defense too. Obviously, I mean the first name that comes to mind is Raekwon Smith. Now with the Bears, so I think there's holes to fill from some talented players. I don't think they'll go the regular season without being undefeated.
Yeah.
But they'll definitely be good. So I think we're just gonna have to wait and see how Kirby Smart handles replacing some of his some guys that he really needed to lean on, and then but he's got the quarterback Jake Fromm, and they're gonna have to lean on him more this year, and as opposed to rely on Chubb and Michelle. And to round out my top 10, 2 Big Ten teams, Wisconsin and Michigan State. I think Wisconsin definitely the cream of the crop of the Big Ten West. I don't think they'll have much competition there, other than maybe Iowa. But they also do have a couple of cross conference, cross division games against Penn State, and also I believe they play Michigan. They play Michigan. Yeah, they Penn State and Michigan, which is not what the Badgers had last year when they rolled to the Big Ten without really any fuss. Big Ten championship without any trouble. And so that wraps up my top 10. Obviously, I don't have Mississippi State in the top 10. I think that was a little bold, especially with the new coach.
You have Miami in the top 10. That's somewhat bold as well.
Not even the top 10, the top 5. The top 5. I think that the Hurricanes, I think Mark Richt, I would love to see a Mark Richt Kirby Smart battle.
That would be good.
I think that would be a lot of fun, because a lot of people criticized Richt for not being able to bring Georgia to the pinnacle of college football, not being able to win the big game, and I think that would just kind of be ironic. That he would get Miami there.
That would be ironic. Maybe it's like one of those. You get a little bit motivated after. Maybe he was a little bit complacent at Georgia, and after being let go from UGA, he got a little bit more of some motivation, a little bit of fire under his ass to get the Canes rolling. And it's not like Miami has no tradition. It's not like he's taken a school like Georgia Tech, and this is not to talk bad against Georgia Tech. The Ramblin' Wreck certainly has tradition, but it's not one of those powerhouse schools that you think of that's tradition rich. So he's taken a Miami team, really gotten the recruiting going, and I'm glad to see it. I think he's a good coach, and that would be really interesting to see. I mean, imagine the semifinal against Miami versus Georgia. That would be
that would be a lot of fun. That would be insane.
And one of the semifinals is the Orange Bowl, so that could be potentially in Miami. So that would be
those
icing
Miami
on the cake.
Those Miami fans will be in for a treat there because they have literally nothing else going on for them, and they really don't even care about the Hurricanes. But maybe for that game they will.
Gosh, it'd probably be 75% UGA fans in Miami Stadium.
So next we're gonna go over our sleepers. Who do we think? What's a team that's not given much hype that could make some noise when it's all said and done, and picking conference champs and playoff teams?
I think that, just to preface this, we want to make sure that we're not picking teams from the AP. We're not just trying to regurgitate what the AP has said or what ESPN's talking heads have been saying. So this is all based on our research, based on our rankings and things along that line. So I think a team that could surprise people this year is South Carolina. I think South Carolina has an opportunity to do some really big things. They've got a good quarterback in Jake Bentley. Now, he's not Heisman worthy, at least he hasn't been yet, but he's very serviceable, and they've always got a strong defense. Will Muschamp is going to coach those boys up on the defensive side of the football, and that's kind of been to an extent, that's been his downfall, right? Like at Florida, he had such a great defense, but they couldn't move the ball 10 yards on offense. So now that he's got a decent quarterback, seems to have gotten the recruiting rolling a little bit, I think South Carolina has potential to win the SEC East. They played Georgia at home the second week, or the third week. Is it
second week two in Columbia?
In Columbia, correct. So, they might be able to catch Georgia before Georgia really, gets their quarterback situation figured out, or is able to really hone in on, they just haven't had the experience of beating like an FCS school to really get their roster set up the way they want it. So I think South Carolina has a really good opportunity to surprise people here. Now, what would you say, Bo, as far as a sleeper? Who do you have?
Well, first, I'd like to say I agree with South Carolina. I think they will be good. They showed some improvement last year under Muschamp. But even last year, we were actually at the game, the South Carolina Georgia game in Athens, and that game wasn't really competitive. I mean, Georgia kind of just knocked the snot out of them. Yeah. Really, the final score may not have indicated that, but that game wasn't really close talent wise. You can definitely see the discrepancy in the teams there. But I think the gap's going to be closed a little bit here this year, especially with the game being in Columbia. That stadium always rocks for those types of games.
Yeah, for sure.
My sleeper, UCF.
Central Florida, baby.
Central Florida.
And I just want the viewing audience to know that Bo does not like Group of Five teams. Bo probably thinks they should be in their own conference. Bo's a tradition Power Five guy, so this is saying a lot if you think UCF.
I think they lose. Yeah, I don't really. I'm sorry, I don't really care about the Group of Five. When it like the Mountain West Conference, maybe Boise State. I don't think I'll ever tune in to one of their games when they're playing Air Force, but I'm sorry about that. But no, I think UCF is going to be great again. Their quarterback Mackenzie Milton is a very good college quarterback, and they have talent. He has talent around him, returning on offense. The defense loses Shaquem Griffin.
Right.
But they also, he had talent around him as well. And Scott Frost did a great job of getting that program back. And I remember they used to be on the bottom 10. The guy at ESPN would always do a bottom 10, and UCF was always on the bottom 10.
Well, they had a couple of defeated years, I think.
They did go 0-12.
Yeah.
Not too far, not too long ago. They went 0-12. So you gotta give a lot of credit to them in Central Florida. But my bias is going to show a little bit here, but they're going to have a tough game at Kenan Stadium in the third week of the season. That place always rocks.
That place hasn't rocked since they beat Miami in
2004. Yeah, 2004.
I remember they took the field goal post down, but that'll be an interesting game. I actually think that just looking at Central Florida's schedule, they did mix in a couple of the Power 5 schools, a couple of ACC schools in UNC and Pittsburgh. And like Bo mentioned, that UNC game's on the road. Not that Chapel Hill is ever a hostile environment, especially at a 12 o'clock game. We've known that
it's going to be 100 degrees. It's going to be in the middle of September. It's always 100 degrees. It's going to be terrible.
And then Central Florida's got Pitt at home September 29th. So if they can pull those wins out, of course Navy's going to be a tough game. South Florida's going to be a tough game. Maybe
Pitt's improved.
Yeah,
Pitt's improved.
Yeah, Memphis might give them a hard time as well.
I think they got 11-1.
11-1. I was going to say 10-2.
10-2.
I think they could potentially lose to Pitt. And then
But they're favored in all those games.
Right. And
they're favored in all those games.
Florida. So it'll be interesting to see. Scott Frost obviously gone, and I think Scott Frost is going to do big things in Nebraska. Maybe we'll be talking about him in a year or two. In our annual podcast, we'll be talking about Nebraska next year as a potential sleeper. But we'll see how they play. But I think Central Florida is probably a good pick too, and I'm surprised to hear you say that, Bo. Since you're not a Group of 5 lover. But
that's okay. We're always eating our words at some point.
Oh gosh. All right, so to follow up with our sleepers, let's go with overrated. So there's some teams that we think have the potential, based on our rankings, to perform vastly, just to underwhelm us, really. And one of my teams, this is going to contradict what Bo said, but my big team is Miami. I am not a Canes believer. I've got them ranked 13th in my preseason poll, and I could easily see them having a 8-4 season. And not that 8-4 is bad, but for Miami standards and for being in the top 10 in most of the AP polls and things along those lines, I could see them having an 8-4 season. The LSU game to kick off the season, if they lose that game, because I don't think LSU is any good either, but if they lose that game, I think they're in for a long year. But we shall see. Their schedule's not too tough. They've got a couple of pancakes after that game. So they should, at worst, be 3-1 or 4-0 heading into the ACC schedule where they open with UNC.
Watch out for FIU, the Fighting Butch Davises. I like FIU a lot, actually.
They've also got Florida State at home, but they're on the road at Boston College. That feels like a game they could lose. At Georgia Tech is another one of those. Miami had a good year last year, but they also won a ton of close games. They were 10-2 or 11. What were they? 10-2 after the regular season. They could have easily been 8-4. They beat a bad Florida State team in a close game. They barely beat Pitt. They really just kind of got by in a lot of games and didn't impress me that much. And I don't know that there's anything coming in that's going to add to that team besides just more experience from the players they already have. So,
Mark Gregg had a great recruiting class come in. I think that will help build some depth. I think that the LSU game, I don't think they'll have any trouble brushing off LSU. I think LSU is on a decline as a program.
The Raging Cajuns?
Yeah, the Raging Cajuns. Well, can't call them the Raging Cajuns because there's another team in that state called the Raging Cajuns, but they have a Raging Cajun leading them. I don't think they'll have a problem with LSU. That game's on a neutral field, and then but circle the game versus Florida State and circle the game at Boston College on a Friday night, no less. Chestnut Hill loves Friday night. There's been a lot of Friday night games at Boston College on a Friday night. Versus Duke, that's at where's that at? That's at Miami. So no Halloween night magic again for the for the Hurricanes there, but at least it is still Duke, who is going to be good this year. I think they're going to have to make some noise in the Coastal Division of the ACC. My overrated team is Michigan. I know that may be a trendy pick.
It does seem to be a trendy pick for the college football. I mean, we were watching earlier, and I hate to reference ESPN because I think sometimes they're off base, but Desmond Howard, and of course he's a homer, picked Michigan to make it in. Now Kirk Herbstreit probably picked Ohio State because these guys can't set their biases aside like us, real sportscasters here. Yeah.
But I just think I don't really know much about the quarterback that they brought in. They haven't shown me enough over the past years. Shea Patterson, the transfer from Mississippi, from Ole Miss, I don't like transfers. Yeah. First of all, I don't like transfers because if you weren't able to make it in your original place, what makes you think that they can make it in their new home? And obviously there are exceptions. Exhibit A, Baker Mayfield. Yeah. So, but for the most part, and Russell Wilson. But for the most part, I don't think transfers do great. UNC quarterback from last year, the LSU,
Harris.
Yeah, Brandon Harris. Terrible. Yeah. In a word, terrible. Terrible. That's just I don't like to put a lot of weight on transfers, and especially the beginning of the year.
Right. It's going to be interesting. Michigan's got a pretty tough schedule. Again, that Big Ten East is tough, but
they have a good running back, and they have a good defense. But the Big East, the Big Ten. I gotta stop saying the Big East. The Big Ten East is stacked. Yeah. They got Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State.
The winner of that division could potentially have 2 conference losses, which is insane.
Almost unheard of.
Yeah. So that I think Michigan does have the potential to do big things. I don't think they will do big things.
But they've had potential to do big things for the past since Harbaugh got there. You know, they do all these trips around the world, and they show. I think it's great that they do that, but I don't think that it helps.
Right.
Like it grows the game of college football, I believe. But that I don't think people in Rome really, at the end of the day, care about college football.
Yeah. I don't think we're getting any Romans.
We're
hopping on board to come to the big house.
I don't think that we'll see college football rejuvenate the Coliseum. I don't think the next big event to grace the sacred grounds of the Coliseum will be Michigan versus Indiana. It's not going to happen.
Oh man, the gladiators are going at it.
I hope the Lions. Lions are gone though.
Jim Harbaugh would love that. Apparently, he's a history buff of some kind. But
so yeah, those are our sleepers and our overrated teams that we think is going to fold out as 2018 goes along. So let's move on to conference champs, and let's go just alphabetically with the ACC, and start out with the Atlantic Division.
In the Atlantic Division, how do you pick against Clemson? They've had a stranglehold on this division for the past few years. I've got Clemson. In the Coastal, I think it is going to come down to Miami and Virginia Tech. And going into the summer, I probably would have said Virginia Tech. However, they did lose some. They lost some key players on the defensive side of the ball to suspension, so some self-inflicted wounds.
And they lost one of the greatest wide receivers in their history.
Yeah, right. So they've had some people move on. I just don't see a team here. And the Coastal's always all over the place. Last year, I think, was the first year that a team that was picked by the media to win the division actually won it.
Yeah, the Coastal's always been mayhem, carnage.
Yeah, carnage in the Coastal. We need to get that trademark.
The carnage, Coastal carnage.
But I'm going to go with Miami again. I mean, I think Georgia Tech has a shot, too. Paul Johnson's always got something up his sleeve. So, Clemson-Miami rematch of last year's ACC championship game.
And who you got?
I've got Clemson in that one, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Hard to argue with anything there. Clemson, Miami, I think, are kind of a cut above the rest, and Clemson a cut above Miami. Even though I do have Miami at 4, I still think that discrepancy, that gap is still going to be too much for the Hurricanes to overcome, and they will lose to them in. Is it back in Charlotte?
I think so. Yeah, it is back in Charlotte.
It's in Charlotte this year. I think Clemson will win the ACC once again.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem like they're going to have a ton of competition. I think there was an article posted that had some percentages as to the teams with the highest percentage to make the college football playoff, and Clemson was number 1 at something like 66%. So
I think that's because they people believe, or whatever metrics they were using, the ACC. I think. Right. Some people think they're having a down year this year,
right?
Which I
maybe just I would say the only difference is Florida State's not. I mean, Florida State's not as strong as they have been in the past. And Louisville lost Lamar Jackson, so Louisville will be down. I think State is still going to be NC State. That is going to be one of those teams that you can't take for granted. You can't take lightly. Wake Forest is decent. Boston College is good.
Is the Clemson NC State game? Is that back in Clemson this year? That's in Clemson this year, right?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah. Did they still have the kicker, Bambard? Is he gone yet?
God.
Or is he still there? Will he be allowed to travel to that game if he is still on the team?
You know what? Clemson should be thanking their lucky stars for him missing that chip shot field goal that would have beat them, and that would have given them their first loss. But if you guys remember correctly, Pitt then beat Clemson a couple of weeks after that. So that would have been 2 losses for Clemson. Maybe they don't get into the college football playoff, even if they still go on to win the ACC championship game. I don't know.
No, that definitely knocks them out.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't see it. So it would be interesting to see. They do have State at home. Maybe State's kicking game will be a little bit better, but Clemson does seem to trip up. Last year at Syracuse, Kelly Bryant did get hurt, but no excuse. They should have beat a Syracuse team. It's not that great.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to the Big Ten. What do you got? Big Ten wise, Bo?
Big Ten East. That's just. I think this is going to be the toughest one.
Yeah.
Toughest prediction that we make today. The Big Ten East. I think I'm going to go with Ohio State. I think they're not gonna go undefeated. I don't think that but I think they'll still make it to the Big Ten championship game. They're at Penn State again this year. I don't think Penn State. I mean, they lose the best, maybe arguably one of the best players in college football last season.
Yeah.
Not arguably, he was one of the best college football players last season. In Saquon Barkley, and he did a lot for them. People are really high on Trace McSorley. I am not as high on him. I think that he made some mistakes last year, but it's at Happy Valley. Anything can happen there. And they're also at Michigan State in November. I expect that game to be 10-3 in favor of Ohio State. It might be 20 degrees there in November. And then obviously they have Michigan to end the season, but that's at that's in the Horseshoe.
Yeah.
I have them one loss. I think they lose to Penn State. I think they but they beat they beat everyone else on their schedule.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Sometimes these controversies at the beginning of the season can actually bring a team together. So this team might sort of rally around this whole Urban Meyer predicament. But coming out of the West, who do you have? And I think it's safe to say that
Wisconsin. I think we probably both have Wisconsin getting out of the Big Ten West. The Nebraska. Let's see what Scott Frost can do in his first year. Can he do a turnaround job like he did at UCF? Not this year, but eventually he'll get Nebraska back to their national prowess. Really, they're back from the back in the 80s and 90s when they were a household name in college football. And then Iowa, I think Iowa's going to be good. Their quarterback he's decent. You wouldn't want to throw a whole game on his shoulders, but the offensive line put me behind the offensive line of Iowa, and I could complete some passes too. And the defense is always stout at Iowa. But no, Wisconsin wins. Wisconsin wins the Big Ten West. And they play. When did they play Iowa and where?
It's at Iowa.
Yeah, it's
September 22nd.
It's at Iowa.
Week 4.
Wisconsin wins that game.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hate to follow suit, but just looking at the other team schedules, I don't think Trace McSorley is anything like Baker Mayfield. I think Penn State's going to take a slight step back this year.
And Wisconsin does play at Penn State in November, and I think that they may lose that game, but I think they beat Michigan, and I think they beat Iowa, and I think they beat the rest of the teams in the West.
Yeah, so just to kind of float off of that, I also have Wisconsin coming out of the West. I think that's a foregone conclusion. I would be completely shocked, if anyone else was able to get out of the Big Ten West besides Wisconsin.
So what about your daunted East pick?
Yeah, so my East pick, I'm looking at the schedules here, and I've been torn on this one going back and forth, but I'm going to have to go with Ohio State as well. Michigan State has a pretty good schedule, and I think that Michigan State will be the number one challenger. Their toughest game will be at Penn State, and then they get Michigan and Ohio State at home, and they avoid Wisconsin on the crossover. So I think Michigan State will be the toughest competition, but again, Ohio State got some of the best players in college football. Urban Meyer will figure it out. They'll get it going. So let's move on to the Big 12. What do you got in the Big 12, Bo?
Big 12, I have to go. I'm high on West Virginia. I think they'll be very good. I think they're gonna, especially offensively, Will Grier could be the best quarterback in the Big 12, if not the country. And he's another transfer from Florida, but he's had a couple. Right. He's had a couple years to get under his belt there at West Virginia.
And he wasn't a guy that transferred because he wasn't doing well. He sort of had a weird situation where he failed that drug test, and then there was I think there was just some miscommunication between him and the Florida staff, and he ended up deciding to get out of Gainesville. So it wasn't like he lost his starting job and then decided to transfer or anything like that.
But I think this pick, my pick for the Big 12 may surprise some people. I'm going to go with Kansas. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding there.
Wait, stop. Kansas. Pause. Kansas State?
No.
Bill Snyder?
No, I think the Big 12, I think Lincoln Riley, again, do they have a game this year, a conference championship game this year, the Big 12?
They do have a conference. Last year was the initial Big 12. They smoked TCU.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. They did.
Jerry World.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Oklahoma again. OU.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I'm going to divert from the similarities that we've had. I'm going to go West Virginia. I think that this game will essentially the Oklahoma-West Virginia game will come down to who wins the regular season, and then they'll probably play again in the championship. So it's at West Virginia on November 23rd. That's going to be
a great game. Last game.
Yeah,
Thanksgiving week. Is that Thanksgiving Day? That is
the Thursday.
November. I think I think that is Thanksgiving Day. The 23rd of November. No, it's Friday. The Friday, day after Thanksgiving. So Black Friday.
Black Friday.
On Black Friday. So don't go to the mall that day. Wait till after that game.
That's true.
Or that's at 8
That's
p.m.
an 8 o'clock start.
But they got stuff going on like to the next day. So don't worry about your shopping. Put it off. That's going to be a great game to watch at West Virginia.
And the thing about that one is, if I could see Oklahoma winning that game and then losing in the conference championship, or vice versa. So it's potential that there will be those teams will play.
But then, so what do you? So
games.
If you're a college football playoff, what do you? The committee, what do you do there?
Yeah, that's a great.
Do you give more validity to the win for Oklahoma at West Virginia because it's at West Virginia, and if West Virginia wins the next week on neutral field, like do you say, oh well, like you got to give the edge to the Sooners there because they won it at home? But anyways, I think that we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Next we have the
Pac-12.
Pac-12. We said we were going to go in alphabetical order, so I had to go through my alphabet there.
A, B, C, D,
E, F, G. SEC will be last, correct, I think. Yes. Pac-12.
And I'll start on the Pac-12. I think that Oregon is going to do big things in the Pac-12 North. But right now, as far as I'm concerned, the Pac-12 North runs through Stanford. So I've got Stanford. Actually,
the Huskies are in that.
This is one I've been so undecided on.
And the Cardinal never get there.
That's true. I'm going to go Washington in the Pac-12 North. And then a surprise pick in the Pac-12 South. I've got Arizona coming out of the South. Khalil Tate, I think, is going to do really big things. I even have Arizona preseason ranked. A lot of people have them just outside of the top 25, but I think they're going to do big things. The Pac-12 South is pretty weak. I don't think USC is a great team. JT Daniels, their potential starting quarterback, could be a senior in high school. Whether or not he's good is yet to be determined at the college level at least. So I've got Washington playing Arizona in the Pac-12 championship game with Washington winning that. What do you got, Bo?
I have the Huskies also winning the North. The Cardinal. I like Stanford Cardinal. I think that Bryce Love. I think Bryce Love is the Heisman. Should be the Heisman favorite. I think it's like 5-1 right now, and Tua's 4-1.
Right.
But Bryce Love, I think he's really good ball player. So not really surprised there with the Huskies. But they'll meet. They're going to meet the Utes of Utah in the conference championship game. I think Utah is a very good team. It's always tough going to Utah.
Yeah.
I think obviously their biggest competition will be the Trojans. Will be USC, and they I think. But I don't think Arizona. I don't think Arizona's that. They'll be all right with new coach Kevin Sumlin and Herm Edwards at Arizona State. They have work to do. But in USC, the USC game's at home. The USC game is at home at Utah. They do go to Stanford. That's a loss, I think. But they have Oregon at home. They're at UCLA and at Colorado. Arizona at home. No, I think Utah. I think Utah is a 2-loss team in the conference, and I think that wins the South.
I'm really excited to see Chip Kelly and what he does at UCLA.
But it's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, it's not going to happen this year, but just in the future, I'm excited to see what he's going to do. I've really loved watching Oregon play. It's one of those. It's just a huge change of pace from like the SEC ground and pound. I mean, they have smaller players that can fly all over the place. He's in UCLA. I mean, he's going to be able to recruit that West Coast, those California kids. So look for UCLA to be strong in the coming years, no doubt.
But then to wrap up the big Pac-12, Washington takes the crown.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's move on to the SEC. Bo, do you want to start with the SEC?
SEC. I'm going to start with the West. I think that it's going to come down to Alabama and Auburn, like it did last year. And this game is in Tuscaloosa this year. Alabama, I've already voiced my concerns about Bama, but they're Bama. They're going to be I think they're going to be really good on offense. Defense, they have probably some young studs, but they have injuries. Alabama in the West.
Yeah.
And in the East, I think it comes down to week 2, South Carolina and Georgia. I'm gonna call with the upset and the unpopular pick. South Carolina makes it to Atlanta this year. I think they don't play LSU. I mean, LSU's not great, but it's still LSU,
right.
and Georgia does play LSU at LSU.
They got Auburn at home too.
And they got Auburn at home. And Florida, like they beat Florida pretty bad last year, but in Florida always is a tricky game for Georgia.
Yeah.
But South Carolina plays Clemson, but that's a non-conference game.
Right.
So I think Bama, South Carolina, but Bama wins that.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I feel like it's nearly impossible to not pick Alabama to win the West. While they've gone on to win probably more national championships than West Division titles because they've gotten in a couple times without winning the West, whether it be to LSU or to Auburn, I still think that you can't pick against Bama to win the SEC West. So I've got them coming out of the West, and then in the East I've got Georgia. A rematch of last year's SEC championship, of last year's college football playoff championship. I have actually got Georgia in this game. I don't think Alabama is as good this year as in years past, at least on the defensive side of the ball, but I think their schedule plays out well enough that they'll be able to mask some of those concerns. And I think by the end of the year, Georgia will have figured out their offensive flow and will do a good job of keeping Jake Fromm and Justin Fields in the mix. I mean, you can't keep that guy off the field. He might not be the starting quarterback, but he's going to be in there some playing. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the SEC shakes out because there's a number of different ways that could go. But I've got Georgia over Bama in the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I imagine you have Bama beating South Carolina.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And so now that we got conference champs out of the way, that a lot of times leads into our the playoff teams. It's funny how there's there's a Power Five like big conferences, but there's only 4 playoff spots, which I'm cool. I don't think that should expand anytime soon. I'm cool with 4. But my 4 this year, Bama, Clemson. I don't really know in which order where they will meet. I mean, if they go undefeated, if both of them go undefeated, then that's 1-2 right there. Take your pick on which one's 1, which one's 2. But then I got Wisconsin, and to come out of the Big Ten, they're going to beat whoever they play in the East in the championship game. And I think you got to go with Washington.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be Washington. The Big 12 gets left out again.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 just they have good football, but for some reason they don't get the respect. I think if Clemson was not in the ACC probably wouldn't get the respect. The Big 12, I feel like until Texas really gets it back on, they're probably going to receive some shade just from the voters. But my top four, I have Clemson at 1. I think they'll go undefeated in the regular season, make their way into the number 1 seed. It's hard to see a college football playoff without Alabama in it, or without an SEC champion. So if Georgia were to beat Alabama in the SEC championship, as I have predicted, it's hard to not see one or both of those teams getting in. I mean, I could see Georgia winning the East with 2 losses and then beating Bama in the championship game. But there's no way they're not going to put the SEC champion in the college football playoff. So for that reasoning, I've got Clemson, Bama, Georgia, same 3 as last year, and then my 4th team is Washington. So the Big 10 and Big 12 get left out this year. I think
What if Washington loses that game to Auburn? Are they in? And
if they pretty much win out after that, I think Washington really needs to win this game against Auburn, but it's going to be. I don't think that they might lose that game. It'll be really interesting to see how they face up against Auburn, that SEC defense. But if they lose that game, it's going to be. They're probably going to need to win out, and I think they certainly are capable of doing that.
And they'll need help.
Right. And they'll certainly need help, but I think the Big Ten is just going to beat up on itself too much, and the Big Ten doesn't get the love that the SEC does. So the SEC can kind of beat up on itself, but people will still put them in. I think that the Big Ten will beat up on itself a little bit, and none of them will get in.
So national champ.
National champ, I have the Clemson Tigers.
Clemson Tigers.
What about for you, Bo?
Yeah, let's go all in on Clemson.
Yeah.
Let's go all in on the Tigers.
All right, so we're flying out to Vegas tomorrow to put those bets down. So
the Tigers, they got the defense, they got the running back, they got the quarterback, whoever it will be.
Yeah.
I think they're a complete team. I think they're more complete than Alabama. And there may be some some development, some things they need to work on throughout the year, but
right.